What's up, guys? Thumbs up. Hope you're having an awesome day. We get to jump into my favorite subject, which is social studies. What we do in fifth grade is we talk about American history, but we really pick up where you left off in fourth grade. In fourth grade, you talked about all kinds of things like people coming over to America, the explorers, and all of that kind of thing. And then you did the American Revolution, the Constitution, and all of that kind of stuff. And hopefully, you got to the Civil War by the end of fourth grade. And so, what we do in fifth grade is we pick up at the very end of the Civil War, and we get as close as we can to modern day, to what's going on in our country today. So what I wanted to do today is kind of talk about the very end of the Civil War, how the Civil War ended, so that way we can jump into what was really going on in our country after the Civil War. So towards the end of the war, we have this guy, this general named William T. Sherman, and General Sherman was a general for the North. He was for the Union, and General Sherman really was kind of a bad dude. He didn't take much mercy on the South, and so what Sherman did is he decided that the war had gone on for long enough. At this point, we're in 1864. The war started in 1861, so it's been going on for 3 years, which is a long time. And he decided that he had had enough. He was tired of seeing people die, and so he was going to end this war. And so what General Sherman did is he brought his soldiers down to the South, and they started what they call the March to the Sea. What he did is he started right here in Atlanta, and General Sherman completely destroyed Atlanta. What he would do is he would burn cities, burn these major cities. He'd burn the buildings to the ground. He'd burn churches, houses, whatever he could get his hands on, he would burn it down. He would completely destroy it. So that way the people who lived in that city would be kind of left with nothing and would have to surrender. So we started in Atlanta, and then once he left Atlanta, he marched down Georgia towards the coast, and the next place he went to was Savannah. So another big city that you've probably been to. And when he was in Savannah, he destroyed Savannah. After Savannah, he went up the coast into South Carolina, and he destroyed one of our favorite cities, Charleston, popular city in South Carolina. So he went through Charleston, and he destroyed Charleston. And then after he destroyed Charleston, he went back up through South Carolina towards North Carolina, and he finished, here, let's see if I can change it. He finished in Columbia, and he destroyed Columbia. So what we call this technique that Sherman used, this effort to try to destroy everything, we call that total war. And total war really means trying to destroy everything. Sherman didn't want to just kill soldiers. He didn't want to just destroy buildings. He wanted the people in the South to completely surrender. And if you destroy things like churches and schools and all of those kind of things, then people don't really have a whole lot to fight for anymore. And so Sherman went through and kind of destroyed whatever he could. He burned it all down. One of the things that he's famous for doing is taking the big metal railroad ties, and they would bend those around the trees. They would get a lot of men, and they would bend them around the trees so that the railroads wouldn't work anymore. And so if you didn't have railroads, then you couldn't deliver supplies between places. So like I said, Sherman was a pretty bad dude. You can notice right here, he had lots of men, lots of men. Whenever they would march, they would be 60 miles wide. 60 miles wide. That would be like from here at school to Columbia wide. And they marched over 300 miles in all. You might remember some things from third grade that Sherman did while he was in Columbia. You might remember if you're on the steps of the State House, there's a statue of George Washington, and he's holding a sword. And if you remember, at the bottom of the sword is broken off. Well, one of Sherman's men actually did that. As they were leaving Columbia, after they had like burned down the city and destroyed all they could, one of the men turned around and they took a brick and they threw it at that statue, and it actually hit the bottom of the sword and broke the bottom of the sword off, and it's still like that today. So Sherman went on his march to the sea, and then his march through the Carolinas is what we call it, and he kind of tried to completely destroy the South. I want to show you a couple pictures and paintings from Sherman's March. There's this one. If you notice in the background, lots of fire. That was one of the things that he was famous for, was burning down things. If you've ever been to Barnwell, which is right down the road, they actually nicknamed that town Burnwell because everything in there burned when they came through. So you'll notice the fire. This is just a painting that would be Sherman on his horse as they went through, and they burned things. And like I said, he wasn't just trying to destroy buildings and that kind of thing. He wanted to destroy the South, their will to fight, their desire to fight. This is an actual picture from Columbia. Hopefully you notice all the rubble kind of on the ground here. That's from buildings being completely destroyed, and that kind of thing, as they kind of came through the cities. So that's another picture that shows you what Sherman and his guys did as they came through. Another picture, I want to say this one is from Savannah. It might be Charleston. I think it's one of those coastal cities, but you'll notice that the buildings are collapsed. You can see the roofs here are kind of falling down, that kind of thing. And then one more picture. This is another painting from Sherman's March. And again, you can see the flames in the air, the fire. So that's kind of what Sherman did. There's a famous letter that Sherman wrote to Abraham Lincoln as he was going through the South. And he said, "I present to you the city of Charleston, I believe, as a Christmas gift." So he destroyed these cities for the Union cause, again, trying to destroy the will of the Southern people to fight. And so obviously after Sherman came through and he destroyed these major cities, it made it really difficult for the cities to build themselves back up at the end of the Civil War, during Reconstruction. And so Sherman's March was towards the end of the war. And so after Sherman's March, the South kind of realized that they're not going to be able to win this war. And so the official end of the Civil War happened at a place called Appomattox Courthouse. Appomattox Courthouse was just this farmhouse in Virginia. And so what happened was Robert E. Lee, if you remember, he was the main general for the South. He met up with General Ulysses S. Grant, and he officially surrendered. And so when he surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse, and this is Appomattox Courthouse right here, that was the official end of the Civil War. When we look back on the Civil War, more Americans died in the Civil War than any other war. And the reason for that is both sides were considered Americans. So every person who died in this war was an American. And so we lost 620,000 soldiers in the Civil War. A famous quote that happened after Appomattox Courthouse is somebody said, "The war's over, the rebels are our countrymen again." And so if you remember back to 4th grade, the South was trying to secede from the Union, and so they were considered rebels. And so now that the war was over, the South were considered their countrymen. They were a part of the country again. And so Appomattox Courthouse is the official end of the Civil War. So that brings us to this question. Now that the Civil War is over, what do we do? What's the country going to do now that the war is over? How is the end of this war going to impact people who live in the South where they had lost the war? More specifically, what about specific groups of people like African Americans who were slaves, who are now going to be free? How is the end of the war going to impact those kinds of people? If we think about it, the majority of the Civil War was fought in the South. And so the South, because of people like William Sherman and those kinds of folks, is going to be completely destroyed. And so what the South is going to have to do is the South is going to have to rebuild itself. And that's why the period after the Civil War becomes known as Reconstruction, because they are reconstructing uh, their cities. But even on top of that, even though the South has to rebuild their cities and that kind of thing, our country, the United States of America, has to rebuild itself. They have to figure out how are we going to bring the southern states back into our country. And so the country itself is having to rebuild as well. And so that's why the period right after the Civil War is known as Reconstruction. And that's where we really start in fifth grade, is with Reconstruction. And Reconstruction is going to have a huge impact on people like African Americans and white Southerners and even Northerners, are all going to kind of play a role in Reconstruction. And so that's really the end of the Civil War. And so, what I want you to do now is, if you go to the social studies section of your notebook in OneNote, and you go to the end of the Civil War page, you'll see some notes there that kind of have all of this summarized. And there are some review questions that I want you to answer really quickly. So what you can do is you can copy those review questions. If you go to your social studies classwork page, you can paste those review questions there. And just type your answers to those three questions. Who was the Union general that marched to the sea and destroyed the South? Where did the Civil War officially end? And why is the period after the Civil War called Reconstruction? Hope you have an awesome day. Good job.